Hi, this is a lesson on action circles. Since Values to Action started using action circles, we've had numerous requests for more information about how they work, and we've been pretty busy, but we finally got around to trying to put together the material you need to understand how action circles work and maybe to get started leading an action circle or certainly participating in one. So I'm going to argue that action circles could be one of the key building blocks for a social movement that we badly need if we're going to address the many problems that our societies face. So action circles. I argue that they're a building block for the social movement that we need. Let me first talk about the obstacles to achieving the social change we need. For one, there are very few people who are actively involved in trying to bring about the many changes that we need in society. We're pretty much leaving it to the activists who are willing to spend most of their time and very often working very hard to achieve the changes that are needed. Another obstacle is another one is the social cost of speaking up when you believe in something that you're trying to promote. What we found in social media is that it is easy to get shot down and shut up, and many people just don't want to have those experiences of people attacking them and criticizing them and so on. So those social costs of speaking up have silenced a lot of people. In addition, there's no clarity about what can be done. You got a lot of problems, but what do you really know that you have confidence would make a difference in them, or great hope that it would make a difference in them? And then there's the overwhelming nature of the problems we face. There are just so many problems. What can you do? It's just overwhelming. And there's no clear opportunity to make a difference. What could you do to make a difference? It's not absolutely clear to most people. And the other thing is that all the other things we have in our life that leave us little time to try and change the world. We have family commitments and work commitments, and maybe you're in school, and you need recreation and enjoyment. And so all of these things take away from the likelihood that people will get involved in effective social movements. So here's the action circle proposition. If you're troubled by the state of things in your community, and if you don't see how you could make a difference, and if you're unwilling to give up your work, your education, your family, or your recreation to try to make addictions, action circles give you a way to contribute. Action circles consist of 8 to 12 people who agree to work toward a very specific and delimited goal that can be a building block for further progress. So rather than trying to take on a huge task, they break our problems down into small steps. Each action circle can thereby make a concrete contribution to addressing a larger problem. So in action circles, members agree to participate for about 2 months, attending 8 meetings and volunteering 2 to 4 hours a week to the effort. So the action circles, here's some of the action circles we've had thus far. One was on increasing pro-social values, norms, and behaviors in communities. This has come to be our central focus. We think that the changes that are needed in society need to start at the community level. We have a lot of states that are controlled by people who are certainly not going to address these problems. And at the federal government, there's now there's going to be obstacles to significant progress. But and also getting change at those levels is pretty complicated. But at the level of a community, we think we can help communities to begin to pursue the things that are most important to them. And that if we can get that going in many communities, we can begin to change. We'd have islands of well-being and nurturing in all over the country. So we have an action circle that's working on that now, and we have figured out how we can create action circles to help communities sort of comprehensively look at what their situation is and identify and clarify their values, and then begin to act effectively on those values. We had another action circle that was on increasing the use of evidence-based social emotional learning in schools. I and my colleagues have done a fair amount of research on what can be done in schools to improve social well-being. And so this was an action circle focused on how we can get those programs and policies adopted. Then there has been one on increasing the use of effective reading instruction. We're doing a lot of work on trying to increase the availability of effective instruction. We have a program called Phonics that is a computerized system that was developed by the Engelman Becker Corporation, and it is proven benefit in helping kindergarten and first grade kids to begin to develop the skills they need to read. And there are huge disparities in reading between white kids and Hispanic and Black and Native American kids. Though the white kids there are far too many kids who are white who are also not learning to read because of the ineffective methods that have been widely used in teaching reading in this country for the last 40 years. There's a podcast called Sold a Story that you can look up that will tell you about that problem. And then there's an action circle we had on increasing the availability of behaviorally skilled personnel in healthcare. Most of the members of Values to Action are behavior analysts and most of them work with children with developmental disabilities and older people as well. And so a couple of the people who were working on one of the other action circles said they wanted to try and do something about this problem. The problem is that most hospitals and clinics do not have people who are skilled in dealing with the behaviors that many children with developmental disabilities may engage in that stand in the way of their getting effective diagnosis and treatment. But the behavior analysts have the skills to deal with these problems, and so they need to be available in every healthcare setting. So we wrote a guide to how you could get healthcare, why and how you get healthcare to adopt or hire behaviorally skilled people. There was another action circle where we wrote a guide to reforming juvenile justice. And we have an action circle that just completed and submitted a paper on harmful marketing of things like tobacco, alcohol, other drugs, fossil fuels, guns. And we're hopeful that that will make a difference in terms of getting people to understand that the harmful marketing is a social determinant of health that accounts for as many as 1 million premature deaths a year. And so we should be doing more about it. And then there's an action circle we had on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And actually, we've had a couple of them on that. I want to talk first about the formation of action circles. Let's just imagine that somebody has a concern about a problem in a community. Might be homelessness or child abuse or poverty or conflict in a community or health disparities or climate change. All kinds of problems that could be worked on. In most cases, a great deal of empirical literature is already available about the extent of the problem, the cost of the problem, and also policies and programs that have been shown to affect the problem. So there is a lot of information, but it's not being used. That's one of the reasons that I created Values to Action, because Values to Action is designed to get out effective solutions to problems which have not been widely disseminated. To translate this information into concrete effective action is less clear how you do that. There's an enormous body of knowledge about the problems of human behavior, but progress in turning this knowledge into effective action has been limited. I apologize, I'm being somewhat repetitive. An action circle could be convened to come up with a strategy to begin to address the problem. There might be a brief message written by somebody who wanted to create an action circle that proposes the formation of an action circle to address a specific problem and to come up with some specific outcomes that would begin to address the problem. So suppose you're a community member concerned about one of these problems. You might invite a few friends who share your concern to develop an action circle to work on it. So let's take homelessness as an example. Suppose you wanted to create an action circle on homelessness. Well, sure enough, there's a thorough analysis of the problem and what can be done about it. And it was created by Bill Barberg. And he did an analysis of a wide variety of evidence-based policies and programs that could address homelessness. And in fact, he enumerated 27 different strategies that can have an effect on some aspect of homelessness. They range from strategies that address underlying system issues, such as reducing the cost of developing new housing, to helping chronically homeless people get supportive housing. And so there's a vast set of things that can be done. And if you wanted to make a difference in your community, you could put together an action circle to begin to work on it. And that could be a starting point for an action circle, the knowledge that we have. You and your friends could write a brief description of how an action circle could identify policies that could be implemented in your community and use it to invite a judiciously chosen set of up to 12 people to participate in a 2-month action circle. And when I say judiciously chosen, I have in mind that they should be people who have the time and the interest and are concerned about the problem and have some expertise. And it would probably be valuable if you had people who are already working on the problem of homelessness in your community, because if you don't, whatever you come up with is going to arrive like a dead letter to people working on the problem. They need to be involved in this, and you can help them. So the invitation would briefly describe the extent and cost to your community of homelessness and the fact that there are policies and programs that could contribute to alleviating the problem. That the invitation would explain that effective solutions are available but have not been implemented. So it would propose that an action circle be created. It would identify a menu of actions that could use evidence-based strategies to affect homelessness. And you could create additional action circles to work for the adoption of specific policies once you had identified those policies. And the invitation would indicate that the action circle would involve a commitment to a meeting on at least 8 occasions over 2 months, spending 2 to 4 hours a week contributing to the action circle achieving a concrete goal that would affect homelessness. So I'm arguing that there's tremendous potential to action circles. And you might think that an action circle is too small to make a difference. And it's true that a single action circle will have a limited impact. For example, an action circle focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in a community might at best get an ordinance passed prohibiting the installation of gas-powered water heaters and stoves. Well, that's going to make a difference in greenhouse gas emissions for sure, but it's going to be a pretty small change compared to all the other sources of greenhouse gas emissions in your community, and it'll only be one community. But consider that. Consider the following. The initial action circle may inspire additional action circles to work on other facets of the problem, which your action circle may have identified multiple policies and you just pick one, but there are many others. And the success of the first action circle could motivate people to begin to work on some of the other ones. So the success of any one action circle may inspire members to join additional action circles. And so you're getting people more involved, but still with, limits on how much they have to do. And I would argue that by breaking a problem as big as homelessness or climate change into small steps, we can develop a movement that engages far more people than are currently engaged in working for social change. An action circle also has the potential to ensure that every member emerges with satisfaction at actually getting something done about a problem. And so, if you think about it from the standpoint of reinforcement, we're trying to set this up in a way that it's pretty reinforcing to be a member of an action circle. And one of the main reinforcements is that they see progress being made. And so this is what's motivated maybe 40 or so of our members to work on action circles and volunteer their time to do it. You can really think about action circles as sort of 2 types. One is a design action circle, which is an example would be the one on homelessness that you might create, where you would look at all the things that could be done and make the case for some of them, and figure out how a next action circle would, or a set of action circles could work on, say, specific policies to affect greenhouse gas emissions or specific policies to affect homelessness. So, as I say, the initial action circle might identify a number of policy objectives that subsequent action circles could be created to address, one policy at a time. Such a design action circle could create a plan that organizes the work of multiple action circles, each working on a single concrete change. I want to just take you through what the agenda for the first action circle meeting might be, and at the same time give you a feel for all of the things that could be done in the subsequent meetings. So the agenda for the first meeting might look like this. There'd be a point where people would share their aspirations that they have for addressing the problem that the action circle is focused on. Then there would be a discussion of the expectations and standard procedures of action circles so that everybody's on the same page with these things. And I would, add that I believe strongly in true democracy, and that involves everyone being heard and listened to, and try to bring people together around a shared understanding so that they can move forward. So in saying these are expectations and standard procedures, that's what we're proposing. The action circle can make changes to that if they choose. The next item is refining the goal, because you and maybe 4 of your friends have written this invitation, and people have said, yeah, I'll be in an action circle. But once they're on that action circle, they should also participate in what that goal is. And so you want to take out the goal or set of goals and discuss them and see if everybody's on board with them. And the next item would be to focus on the importance of psychological flexibility, using an experiential exercise that helps people to understand and experience what it would be to be psychologically flexible. And then there'd be a definition of first steps. We don't want people to leave the first meeting with nothing to do. We want to get started on something. So we got to have each person doing at least some small thing initially. And so that will result in assignments, clarity about who's going to do what between now and the next meeting. And the meetings generally end with a process check where we simply ask people to say how the meeting was for them. So let's talk a little bit more about group members' aspirations. The leading edge of any effort to bring about social change is clarity about our aspirations and our values. To the extent that people come together around a shared understanding of what's important, you will promote solidarity and motivation and cooperation. This is my experience, and it's completely consistent with everything social psychology has taught us. So in the first round of introductions, we ask people, if this action circle could turn out to be transformative, what would that look like? And you might play with the question, but you're asking everybody to actually state, and you're taking notes on everybody's aspirations for what this is going to lead to. And then people would be asked to indicate what kind of skills and experience they bring to this effort. And that's really largely a way of people getting to know each other, but also understand, what kinds of things have been brought to the table in terms of what can be done. And the answer to the first of these 2 questions should be recorded, and a summary of them fed back to the group at the outset of the next meeting. I'm sorry, I've already said that in another way. I apologize. So expectations and standard procedures. We generally ask people to commit to a 90-minute meeting every 2 weeks for 2 months, and 2 to 4 hours each week working on a part of the project. We use pack sticks in our meetings. These are basically popsicle sticks, and each one has a person's name on it. We got this approach we call pack sticks because there's a company that created the PAX Good Behavior game. It's the version of the Good Behavior game that's being done in more than 40,000 classrooms around the country and around the world. And so we have found that this is a good way to make sure that everybody is heard. And so we asked people if it would be okay if we use these pack sticks to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk, and to encourage people who are shy about it to, to participate. And lastly, there's a process check that we propose to do at the end of each meeting, which is just 30 to 60 seconds to say how the meeting was for you, good, bad, or indifferent. And then the other standard practices that we propose are to identify something each member can do over the next 2 weeks, because you got to get them going. And so then there's, and the next part is to follow up on what each person has done at when you get to the next meeting. And I'll elaborate on these in a moment. So, refining the goal. Hopefully a clear goal was stated in the invitation. However, not all members participated in stating that goal, and you need everyone to get on board. So we suggest that you present the stated goal and use pack sticks to get everyone's thoughts about the goal. And you can refine the stated goal in light of the conversation. Now, for design circles, the goal will likely be to identify the problem, its costs, and all the evidence-based programs and policies that can be shown or affected. The design action circle might also have the goal of choosing one specific goal that it can work to accomplish from among all those that could be done. On the other hand, the design action circle might decide that the best they can do is articulate the policies and design how an action circle might work on a specific policy, because each policy is going to need different people. If you're trying to get homelessness dealt with, you're probably going to want to be talking to people who are working in that area, probably want to be talking about builders as well. I want to talk about the importance of psychological flexibility. I will say going into this that the work that has been done related to psychological flexibility, which really began in the 1980s, has dramatically changed clinical psychology, and I think our understanding of what human beings need to thrive. And so this is a brief introduction to it. If you're interested in it, there are tons of self-help books that are based on ACT, acceptance and commitment training, as the clinical intervention that has developed this notion of psychological flexibility. I would recommend one in particular, and that's Russ Harris's, the book is called The Happiness Trap. Anyway, individual and group process is often impeded because people's thoughts and feelings get in the way of taking effective action. It's not uncommon, and indeed it's quite reasonable, that people will have doubts that think what can be accomplished. A problem arises, however, if the thought that something won't work stands in the way of taking action and finding out if it will work. And so being able to kind of hold those thoughts and lightly can help you to be able to move forward. So that's why it's important, and that's psychological flexibility. It's been defined as, and this is a mouthful, but I'll unpack it, as psychological flexibility has been defined as contacting the present moment fully as a conscious human being, and based on what the situation affords, changing or persisting in behavior in the service of chosen values. So the emphasis is on organizing your behavior around your values and the pursuit of your values, but being in contact with the things that may be things that might move you away from working on the problem. So another way of saying this is that it is useful to hold your thoughts and emotions lightly and act on longer-term values and goals rather than short-term impulses, thoughts, and feelings. And this is an approach to living that has helped people overcome most of the behavioral and psychological problems that clinical psychologists have been working on. So let me just walk you through an exercise, which if this were a live program, I would have you actually participate in. And this exercise is drawn from the work of Pro-Social World, which in turn got it from the work of Kevin Polk and his associates. And it's called the ACT matrix. And so think about it this way. We've asked what are your aspirations? Let's say you're in an action circle and you're going to work on the well-being of children and adolescents in your community. So the first thing we'd ask people to do is say what their aspirations are for children and adolescents in the community. And they would, I'm sure, come forward with many useful aspirations. So then the question becomes, okay, that's what you want to accomplish. The second question then is, what thoughts and feelings might move you away from pursuing the change you want to see? You might say, well, I've heard about this PACS good behavior game. I'd like to have that in all our schools. But you might have the thought that, the principals, you can't get them to listen. It would just be impossible to get anywhere with it. And then the next question is, well, if you have these kinds of thoughts, what behaviors might you engage in because of discouraging thoughts and feelings? Well, you might just give up and not work on it at all. And so that's moving you away from your goal. So then the question, okay, so here is this notion of you observing. Imagine that you're sitting here on top of this blue circle and you're looking at your aspirations and you're looking at your thoughts and you're looking at the behaviors, you're thinking about the behaviors that you might engage in that would move you away from your goal. And so now the question is, what specific things might you do to advance the change you'd like to see, even in the context of all of these things? And so this is a way of sort of stepping back and being mindful of what's there without necessarily seeing the world through those thoughts and feelings, and accepting those thoughts like they're true. We often say, hold your hypotheses lightly. And so this is an exercise that can help a group to come together around their aspirations, but also get clear that as a group, what we want to do is be sensitive to the thoughts and feelings and actions that move us away from our goal. And in that context, answer the question, what strategies might help you to hold the left side of this map with awareness and self-compassion while acting in the direction of what matters to you? That's the fundamental question. And in fact, I think in some ways, that's the question we should ask before we take you to what specific things might you do to advance the change you would like to see. And so that is a brief tutorial on psychological flexibility. And again, I emphasize, try Russ Harris's The Happiness Trap. My wife, Georgia, has probably purchased 40 copies of it in the last couple of years, giving it to friends and colleagues who have generally benefited from it. This is titled Establishing a Homework Routine. And I hesitate to use the word homework because we all had homework. We didn't always do it. We didn't like to do homework in very many cases. But I haven't quite found an alternative. I mean, it could be an assignment, but I want to have a quality, not of this is your homework, you need to do it, or this is your assignment, but rather, I choose to do this, that it's the individual who makes this choice. The trick is to get everybody to do a little bit and to follow through on what they plan to do. So, for example, over a 2-month period, a group of 10 people wrote a guide to getting hospitals and clinics to hire behavior analysts. It's Olivia Miller, who works at Boston Children's Hospital, who does wonders with children, and helped us write this guide. Each person took a small piece of the puzzle. Olivia provided examples, and other people wrote up those examples and did some editing of them. And other people looked up behavioral analytic treatments that have proven benefit in dealing with a wide range of kids' behavioral problems. But these are skills that most healthcare providers don't have. They end up anesthetizing or drugging in a variety of ways kids because they have to calm them down enough to do investigation, diagnostic work. But that doesn't have to be. And so we need to have behaviorally skilled people working in every hospital. These were examples of homework that people did, just, a couple hours, 2, 3, maybe 4 hours in a week. You get a lot done, and over 2 weeks, and then you take it back to the meeting. This happened every 2 weeks. Here are other examples. A team of 8 people wrote a paper documenting the need to regulate the marketing of tobacco, alcohol, and unhealthful food. I already talked about that. Members of an action circle analyzed and documented the lack of funding for research on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in federal agencies. We very carefully reviewed the research portfolios of the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, and the Environmental Protection Agency. And we just found nothing and very little in the way of experimental research that would figure out ways to get communities to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, which is a pretty important part of this. So members of another action circle wrote a guide to reforming juvenile justice in communities. Each person summarized evidence on a single facet of the larger problem. One person worked on the harm of punitive approaches to juvenile delinquency and summarizing those. We're encouraging you to get rid of those and replace them with effective interventions. And so other people wrote up what effective interventions are, thanks in large part to the meta-analytic work that Mark Lipsey has done in Tennessee. We pretty much know what works and doesn't work once a kid is identified as delinquent, which, by the way, identifying a kid as delinquent is already a problem. In terms of the future of that kid. Then there are family interventions that are known to prevent the development of antisocial behavior, but also school interventions that prevent delinquency. And in fact, I've done a lot of research in this area and can tell you things that work, which is why we have values to action. So think about this in terms of its motivational power. Each person takes a few hours over a couple of weeks to make a contribution. People are pleased to be making their contributions. And they learn more about the problem and how to solve it. They see a concrete contribution to an important problem come together. They work with other motivated people. I submit that this could be reinforcing for a lot of people. I hope it is. And that we figure out ways for people to work together cooperatively and have some fun and also make a difference. Okay, so to make this work, you have to break the work to be done into small bites. And it's vital that each person gets something to do coming out of the first meeting, and that they understand that the next meeting will ask each member to report on what they have accomplished. This is actually a procedure that I was one of the people who developed it when I was doing clinical psychological work earlier in my career. And what we would do would be, in the first session with the client, we would propose to them that each week we would try and figure out something that they could try over the subsequent week that would help them with the problem that they had. And if they thought it was a reasonable thing to do, we'd write it down. And at the end of the session, there'd be a list of things that people had agreed to do. And so they'd come back, and always the next session was, how did this go? How did this go? Not to say, oh, you didn't do it, or it's what are the issues involved? Do you now think that's not something you should try? That's fine. We'll come up with some other suggestions, but it's always you that decides, not us. So, but it's also clarity that the way we get this done is that you try those things, and then we see how they went. And, if it didn't go well and you didn't do it very much, maybe it's because, it wasn't right for you. We'll try something else. And so we also had a system where people could put money deposits down, and they'd lose the money if they, didn't do things that they agreed to do. And, the administrative assistant, who was our partner in all of this and keeping the books and so on, the money just sat there because people were doing everything. And so we just got rid of it. We didn't have it at all. So the point is that you want to have clarity about, okay, it's something that makes sense to you to do. And you think you can do it, get something done on it in the next 2 weeks. Okay. And then we'll see how it went next week. It's a set of contingencies. It's say do, today we say this, and next week we do this, and the contingency in the next session is what, glues together, yes, I'll do it, with actually doing it. That's the theory, with, I think, a fair amount of evidence to support it. So in sum, developing a routine of having everyone take an assignment and reviewing and building on what was accomplished in the previous 2 weeks can contribute to quite significant progress. And then there's a process check. This is a simple way of making sure everyone feels heard. And it was invented by Peter and Susan Glazer, who are two good friends of ours. And it was, so what we do is we use packed sticks. So every person has a stick, and we make sure everybody talks, and they get 30 to 60 seconds to say how the meeting was for them. People feel listened to. If there are issues, it helps for planning the next meeting and so on. So that's the process check. So subsequent meetings, they follow the same general pattern, always being sure that everyone participates and accepting each person in a nurturing way. I mean, people, need to feel accepted and cared for and so on. And we're building toward the final project with each meeting. People are seeing progress. And then they're getting consultations from Values to Action when they need it. So we think if we get better at helping people set these up and have some successes with them, we'll get better if we are monitoring how this is going and trying to always support it working. So I'm going to pop the question. I'm not sure exactly the circumstances under which you will come into contact with this material, but at some point we're asking you specifically, are you interested in an action circle in your community? So some thoughts about this. I thought about putting this at the beginning of the talk, but I'll put it here. So in the first half of the 20th century, America made tremendous progress in creating a large middle class society that brought about many reforms. And a key reason for these reforms was the creation of numerous organizations that worked towards specific reforms or specific efforts to solve other problems. And that was a key facet of the progressive era movement, which massively changed the country. Robert Putnam has enumerated the organizations that were created during the first very end of the 19th century and the first 30 years of the 20th century. And I mean, look at these: Red Cross, NAACP, Boy Scouts, Rotary Club, Teamsters Union, Campfire Girls, all kinds of organizations. People came together, and there are a lot of people who were members of these. And according to a historian, David Bido, a third of all adult males over 19 were members of a fraternal organization like the Moose or the Rotary. I think about that. A third of the males over 19. That's a lot of people. And these organizations were dedicated to advancing mutual support for self-reliance, business training, thrift, leadership, skills, self-control, and good moral character. And the data are for the males over 19, but by the way, one of these was the League of Women Voters, so it wasn't all males by any means. These organizations were almost all made up of local chapters that engaged people in the very community to promote the aims of each organization. And so they were at the community level making a difference in the well-being. I mean, just go back to that list and think about it. The Red Cross, when there were any, hurricanes or floods or so on, the Red Cross was there. The NAACP to provide support and solidarity in the Black community to try and deal with what they had to deal with, have had to deal with, that continue to deal with. The Knights of Columbus, I know that less well. It's a group in the Catholic Church. I was once a member of the Catholic Church, but I don't know exactly what they do. I don't know what Hadassah does. I know it's a Jewish organization. Boy Scouts, they kind of have a bad rep, but for many years they were a way of helping to raise young men. And the Moose, the Eagles, these were fraternal organizations, and they would get together and well, I described some of the things they did. But there was also the Audubon Society or the American Bar Association. All these things in communities, making the communities a little better. So Putnam then documents how solidarity and local activism began to dwindle in the second half of the 20th century. And he wrote a book called Bowling Alone in America. And I'm reading this book, and it's just fascinating about the bowling alone in America is the notion that there used to be all these bowling leagues, but now people just kind of bowl alone. The leagues had gone. But then he walks through all of these different kinds of organizations that have far fewer members. The Rotary Club, for example, I've been a speaker at many Rotary clubs, but I've sometimes asked them, do you have a dwindling group? Oh yes, we consolidated 2 Rotary clubs and things like that. And so I'm reading Putnam's book, and I'm a little frustrated because he's going on and on and on. And basically it came down to television. In the 1950s, people started watching television and they could just stay at home. And so they did. And that was one of the major things that began to undercut the kind of civic collaboration and cooperation that was so important to the improvements that had happened in society. But also in Rebooting Capitalism, a book that I have published, I document how advocacy for free market economics over the past 50 years encouraged people to believe that the individual pursuit of their own wealth was better than working for the well-being of others. I kid you not, you have to understand this. In the last 50 years, this country has become far less dedicated to the well-being of people around us and far more focused on, I got what I got, and so tough luck if you don't have it. And this is shown in the values of incoming freshmen in colleges that have been monitored for 40 years. And about sometime in the 70s, more kids said they wanted to be rich and famous than wanted to help them, grow as a person and help their community. And that it is just a real change in our values. And so that has been fundamental. But the main reason that this happened was because there was a small group of very wealthy people who invested heavily in convincing people that this was the case. And so we have seen over the last 40 years, and there are papers that I published. I have one coming out, Prevention Science, which is a journal you've probably heard of, I hope you've heard of, which is documenting how this happened. And how it led to huge gaps in the well-being of people, especially disadvantaged to minority group members. So all of these organizations still exist, but they no longer have strong local chapters. They're national organizations that raise their money through media appeals and membership. And by the way, I was president of the ACLU of Oregon, and I have seen this. There's fundraising for the state affiliate, there's fundraising for the national affiliate, and the ACLU provides very specific services around people's civil rights to people. Is certainly the case. And so we find ourselves in communities that lack the social organizations that once promoted civic improvement. Action circles can be the cutting edge of the development of local movements to address all of the problems that are undermining people's well-being. And we are doing that. We're working in one community where quite a number of people have come together to say that to specify what their values are and to work together to try and promote those values and to try and see to the well-being of people in the community. And I think that that's the way to proceed in our communities. I keep saying, nobody's going to win the culture wars. The people who are fighting the culture wars, on the right, don't care about the issues. They're just trying to keep people riled up and on their side. So arguing with them, by the way, if you read my book, my chapter on persuasion and rebooting capitalism, arguing does not work. Arguing is actually reinforcing to people. Putnam has shown the generally positive story about social solidarity and reform was largely restricted to the white population. As a result, we have huge disparities in wealth, income, health, and even premature death. Premature death. As of 2015, Black people under 65 had higher death rates than whites for all-cause mortality. The differences have been as much as one example I am aware of is that there are two neighborhoods that are contiguous where Black and white, and the average age of death among the Black men is like 15 years younger than for the white population. The rate of all-cause mortality among Native Americans is 30% higher than the rate of all races. And that's not simply due to differences in health habits. It's the result also of poverty, discrimination, and economic inequality. And if you're interested, there is a paper that we have just published right here, and you can read that and be up to speed on the problems we confront. So that's why Values to Action is working to help disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged groups within communities organize action circles to address their problems. We help communities organize the actions needed to solve their most troublesome problems. We help them develop a shared vision of what they want their community to look like. And then we draw on the best behavioral science to address problems as diverse as homelessness, family dysfunction, substance use, delinquency, and so on. We can help you create small, efficient action circles that make progress in as little as 2 months. So if you'd like to create an action circle to help your community, email me at tony@valuestoaction.org, and we'll see what we can do. And one more thing. If you have any feedback, good, bad, or indifferent about this lesson, we'd appreciate it. It helps us get better at what we do. And so in giving feedback, you're making a contribution to making our world a better place. Thank you.